Hello, everyone. It's the beginning of another week. Welcome to the show. I am Mariah Afolabi Brown. As always, I have the ladies with me. Hello.
Good morning.
How are you doing, Topwe? How was your weekend?
Weekend was interesting. So we went to represent at Celebration.
Oh, I just see pictures.
Yeah, because we did not take
didn't
pictures.
take
It was a
pictures.
stressful workout. We just, had to just show up. And YK, as usual, was a fantastic host. The rice, the drink was cool. And I just realized that I was analyzing the hub of activity that takes place around that place and the kind of major employment it provides for people that I think the government needs to do more support for what the shrine represents and, provide more platform for them to replicate, if possible, in other states, because it is definitely going to attract people. And we might as well just...
in quite a number of other
No, I'm not
countries.
talking about celebration. I'm saying the shrine concept,
Okay.
which is an entertainment hub that provides employment, provides gathering for
Cannot
people.
replicate the
No, you
shrine. They
can't
can do any other
replicate
clothes,
that,
but
yeah.
let's not
Not the
replicate
shrine.
the shrine.
It belongs to a I family. wanted to go on Sunday, but the rain just kept me at home.
Yeah. I
The
was
Sunday would
planning.
have been...
I was planning for Sunday actually.
Because all the artists were at the head, so we didn't have enough
Sunday,
artists.
when I have to come to work the next day,
The
from my
last time I
distance.
went on a Sunday, so I wanted to go this Sunday.
Yeah. How you doing, Virgil?
Great. It was an eventful weekend for me, starting from Friday, which happened to be my wedding anniversary. After work, I just went to meet Oga at his office. Then we did our outing that evening. And Saturday, I had a Peace and Joy conference, which I happened to be on the panel. And it was mind-blowing. Then afterwards, what else did I do? So that Saturday evening, after all the stress of the conference, I had to still go to celebration. We had fun, so it was just, so I got back to my own house yesterday afternoon, and I needed to sleep, and I slept. I'm good.
That's nice. Good. How you doing, Mary? How's your weekend?
My weekend was good. I had a little surprise on Sunday. Someone had reached out to me on social media asking if I would not mind being featured in the paper. I didn't make anything of it. And then yesterday, my mom calls me screaming, 2.5 pages, cover page. I'm like, what is happening here? So this person just randomly reached out to me on social media. Normally, when you do that, I don't respond. I don't know why I just responded to this person. It was after I sent the information, I thought, Madam, are you okay? You just sent your information. You don't know if it's Yahoo or anything. So I Googled the person. I was like, oh, this is actually what it is. So there's a spread of me on the cover of their lifestyle.
Nice.
Whoa, when did this happen?
Yeah.
Honestly, it was just Friday and then today,
Was it
So
really lovely?
and it's because really of this platform. So of
Yeah.
course I mentioned Mariah. I said everybody has to enter this feature. So
I'm
I
telling
entered
you.
Mariah and all the co-hosts. You have created this platform, Mariah. People can speak. People are asking me about the Northern woman. Who is she? What is she? And then I'm hoping that it sort of talks to a young girl out there that you can do anything but stay authentic and
yourself.
people, your constituents will find you.
They will. They will. Your own people.
Fantastic. I like that. Fantastic.
How was
excited.
cool?
My weekend was nice. Saturday, I was at school. Sunday, I tried to rest. My son saw the picture of the cathedral on that marina in a book. He said, Mommy, does this still exist? I said, yes. They bugged me to go and take him to that cathedral. I mean, talking about bugging. And even the Central Mosque, he wanted to see it because I have this Lagos book that I was given. He saw the pictures and he insisted. He bought me clothes, my hair. Mommy, wear your wig now. Let's go. So I drove him all the way to Marina to see the cathedral.
That's lovely.
He saw it. He was excited. Then we now went to the Central Mosque. He got down. He now was checking to be sure it's the same picture.
Wow.
The guys on the road.
He's
said,
curious.
He was so curious. He went, but it was exciting that he was so happy to see it, and you could see the excitement. I'm like, I should have recorded this moment.
Yeah.
Anyways, I said, are you happy now? He said, Mommy, there's someone called Freedom Park. I'm like, I'm not going to Freedom Park.
Are you teaching them in school?
No, there was a book. There was a book.
Okay.
A photographer, I think I did that, gave me a book that had pictures of various places in the Lagos State.
Landmarks.
So he was really excited about it, and it made me take him to those places. So it was good.
Because you know what is funny? Because my son wants to do Eiffel Tower. So it's better to please give me that book.
Oh, yeah,
So that
so you
I
can
can keep
see
his interest here in Lagos.
All right, let's go on the break. When we come back, we're going to go through the front pages of the newspaper. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Right, we're going to start with the nation. Nigeria rejects IMF stance on forex restriction policy. Battle rages over Mago's fate as EFCC chairman. The OMSL, I think, yeah, that's the Ocean Marine Solutions Limited. They have Setting the Record Straight here article here, responding to an article from this day last week. ASU plans showdown with federal government. Pension fund hits 9.4 trillion naira. Oyo APC PDP clash over 8 billion naira project. Okay, so Nigeria is rejecting IMF stance. The major headline on forex restriction was actually Emefiele insisting, saying that you can say our restriction on bringing on this for the 3 items would not let investors, because according to him, rather the investors come to our country, produce the product within our country, let our people consume it, and we make the money from it. Not that you bring in your own products from outside into our country. That is going to stress the production of our own local production. Yeah. So he's insisting that IMF cannot tell us that restricting those 43 items is going to stop investors from coming to Nigeria.
No,
that's the other way around.
We're also going to be looking at how we can, get people employed in our system when those countries come here, invest in production here, so we get our people to work in those.
I went shopping and there was no imported rice all through. It was just
I bought Ofada rice.
It was not even local Kebbi rice. It's called Lion rice or something. Okay. And I was so happy when I saw the array of locally made rice and no foreign one, simply because they closed the borders.
I still have foreign. I can't wait till I finish the foreign. I like to start buying.
We've been eating the local rice.
It's a bit painful, but
ASU. So ASU is saying that they're going to go head-to-head with the federal government. And this is because of what they call an imposition of the integrated personal payroll system.
On that matter.
Yes. So they're saying the government is sort of imposing it on them, that they've had talks with government to say, you see, this thing, we don't mind accountability, but it does not sort of capture our peculiarities. They talked about their payments of arrears on promotions, study leave allowances. It doesn't capture that. So they're trying to sit down with government, but it seems as if government is insisting on going by the World Bank, what they call exploitative template. So I think this is just a conversation thing, Sit down with the government and ASU and come up with what would locally work for us.
They've been saying, ASU has been complaining about this particular issue consistently for a while, and we're not responding to them. Do we want to wait until they go on strike
again
before we deal with the issue?
Right. Moving on to the Punch. Minimum wage. NLC states chairman meet on Tuesday and talk with governors begin. Flooding, Lagos Ogun brainstorm over the Oyon Dam water release. APC PDP exchange words on Makinde's 8 billion naira interchange. Ebonyi groom slumps at reception, dies in hospital. CBN opposes MTN over the mobile banking transaction access. Sealed Mart, Lagos car dealers demand 10 billion naira from customs. Terrorists smuggling fish into Nigeria, says Army. Economists, farmers disagree on border closure benefits and losses. And recover $103 billion from OIC's banks, Falana tells Senate. And picture here of protesters setting bus on fire in, I think, Chile, Santiago, Chile. Okay, let's talk about the major headline.
Yeah,
NLC.
So after the success of the consensus, which was agreed on by all the parties at the federal level, now the states, various states are saying that they are not going to, their workers are not going to take less than the federal workers. So that means they have to have meetings with the states. So the labor leaders in the various states will be having a meeting on Tuesday at Enugu, the 36 states, where they can now, have their own meetings on the consequential adjustments and how it reflects their states.
Let's talk about the flooding. Lagos and Ogun State are having a meeting concerning this Oyo Dam release.
Yeah, so the Commissioner for Environment and Water Resources, Mr. Tujibelo, was addressing the public, considering the fact that the My 12, Opik area, Wariwa, the Long Bridge, that entire environment has been flooded. Many people have had to move out of their houses because of the flooding, which was caused by the Oyo Dam release. So the talks is between Ogun and Osun and Lagos to find a way to build a master drainage, which I think should have been done before now. Because every time they release the dam, even though it's partially released, the entire area gets flooded and people have to relocate out of their houses.
And Tujibelo was also saying that the water level had actually increased. So there was no way the rainfall. So the water had to come push back into the communities. In fact, our producer's house actually has been flooded. All her washing machine, everything's flooded. In fact, she showed us a picture of her on a canoe getting to somewhere she can get to work. I mean, this is pathetic.
It's
so
really terrible.
obviously something that both states must look into very quickly.
NCC.
Let's take one more story.
The
Is it
NCC, yes.
Go ahead.
We got, for those using the MTN network, we got a viral text message, I think about 2 days ago, saying that they want to start charging 4 naira for every USSD transaction that happens. And so the federal government has ordered that you are paying for going through the banks, using your MTN network to access your banks for payments. So it's more for payment transactions. So the federal government has ordered them to stop, put a halt to it till the ministries are well briefed on what is happening before they go ahead. Okay. While the network is saying that this is not a new thing, that other networks have been doing it at the same time. And it was the bank CEOs that came to tell them that they have to do it because the transactions pass their infrastructure and we have to pay for it. Okay. So I just hope that the meeting is...
Let's move on to the Daily Sun. Banks in secret merger talks. Electricity, World Bank approves $3 billion for Nigeria's loan. Outrage over plan to hike USSDC charges. We talked about that. IPOB mourns as Kanu's mom dies and flown in from Germany for a burial. Okay, the major headline, banks in secret merger talks.
So CBN carried out a stress test a few weeks back, and 7 banks failed.
Right.
And so now they didn't publicize these banks.
Say what are their names?
Because we are curious to know what's going on. But I think that one thing, depositors should be safe because they know that there's a lot of infrastructure to protect our investment in banks. Our monies are not going to go. But because of those banks that failed the stress test, they are now undergoing merger discussion because it's better to have stronger banks than have many weak banks. So
that's the story. IPOB, the mother died August 30th.
Yeah, and it's been, they've been keeping it secret, saying that in Igbo land, when somebody dies, you don't just rush to the media. There are certain things you have to put on ground. And the IPOB leader also is saying that the mother died of shock. You know, in 20, that's
Kanu's mother died.
Kanu's mother died out of shock because she had to vacate her place in Nigeria back to Germany after the Python dance that happened, where she was still struggling with the trauma, having to see 28 dead bodies of young men around her.
And
so that led to her heart attacks, and now she's dead. So hopefully she'll be buried before December.
May her soul rest in peace. Really sad. But they're hoping that by December, they should bury her before December. Moving on now to the Nigerian Tribune. Power sector, World Bank approves $3 billion loan for Nigeria. Border closure, Ghana traders call for boycott of Nigerian products. Man, 2 wives, 6 children die in accident in Oyo. Another die in Ondo. Really sad stories. APC-PDP trade wars. APC-PDP trade wars over the 8 billion Iwo Road reconstruction. Kano Lion, zoo awaits stronger sedative from Abuja. Government abducts ACP in Kaduna. So tell me the lion story is not true.
Yeah, so it's true. Over the weekend, the lion escaped from the zoo in Kano State.
Clearly, again.
Over the weekend,
a lion
escaped.
Mufasa. Mufasa left the kingdom. Go ahead.
So escaped. But the story is, because over the weekend, a lot of people said, oh, they have caught the lion. He has been captured or has been killed. But this is a message saying that, please, we should not believe those rumors. The lion has been sedated, but they need like a reinforcement of a stronger sedative. And they were waiting for it as of yesterday to come in from Abuja. Wow. And then they would sedate the lion because they are meant to make sure it gets back to the zoo unhurt or not killed. So that's where we are.
What's the story about the man and wives that died?
Yes, I took that story. His name is Mr. Gbadamosi. He's the chairman of the National Union of Road Transport Workers in Ogbomosho. He died along with his 2 wives and his 6 children in the car accident on their way to, I think, somewhere in Oyo State.
Sad.
So painful. So painful. It was a road accident, and then the officials are looking into it. Investigations are ongoing. They've been... It's really painful.
Really sad. It is. So the governor of Oyo State and the APC counterparts are actually trading words over the construction. I drafted that road. It's the Lagos-Igbo road. That road needs serious attention. But they're saying, APC is saying that he didn't go through SEC, that is State Executive Council, to get approval, and there's no diagram, there's nothing to show what he's doing. Where did they come up with the 8 billion naira budget to construct it? And
I think APC is doing the right thing.
PDP is, on the other hand, saying that, listen, that APC is being insensitive to the plight of the Nigerians who passed that place. I've passed through that place, and I know.
I've passed through it. Do the right thing.
Horrible.
Do the right thing. Follow the right process.
Yeah.
So
if
there's any gap in the process, then...
Well, I've seen APC being
they should replicate it everywhere, in that every opposition party shouldn't just say what you're doing is wrong. Constructive criticism and advice on the way
to go.
Please, before we go, power sector, there was a concluded meeting in Washington, D.C. between IMF and World Bank. And our Minister for Finance, Zainab Ahmed, said that we've already gotten a loan approved from the World Bank to support our power sector. And this 3 billion will be given to us in 3 tranches to help us. That currently our power is being subsidized. They want to take out that subsidy, improve generation capacity and all of that. But Mariah, we've always had money come into power sector. So the focus should be on the effect of the money trickling down to what it's meant to do.
Again, that's just my own.
Okay, unfortunately, we can't take any more papers right now. We have to run over. When we come back, we'll discuss quite a number of topics, especially this issue of reducing cost of governance as seen in other countries. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Stay tuned. Your View will be right back. Welcome back to Your View.
Thanks for staying with us. So, Liberia's lawmakers, according to report, have agreed to cut about 30% of their total earnings in the country's 2020 budget. The lawmakers said the move is to help the West African nation meet the important IMF standard. So we ask, what are your thoughts on this, considering the fact that our president recently, our federal government recently also advised that we reduce the costs, the spending costs of our lawmakers, especially for the ESTA codes, when they travel. Nothing was talked about salaries, but generally the running cost was recommended to be reduced recently. Now, what are your thoughts on this? You can call us on 070-8066-8014. You can also tweet to us at TVC, and please hashtag YourViewTVC so we can read your tweets. Let me remind us, because I know that, Senator Okorocha said that we should reduce senators to just 1 per state. Yeah. The chairman of the Governors Forum also said that we actually don't even need senators at all. And also, Italy lower Italian the legislature also scrapped. Actually, they didn't scrap. They reduced from 600 lawmakers to I think 400, I believe. Yeah. So all around, we're seeing this new trend of reduction in governance. And Liberia took that bold step. In your view, do you think it's something we should begin to consider, or considering?
Not we all agree.
No, but listen, we have to also consider our population, consider that issue of federal character, ensuring that everybody's represented. There's always that issue. As much as we like to compare ourselves to Liberia, but the entire Liberia is not as much, the population we can't compare to that of Nigeria. So as much as we like to jump on what Liberia is doing, let's be sure that we're thinking about this critically. Are we ensuring that everybody from the 4 corners of this country will be represented? If we do that, either removal of Senate or total cost. Let me hear your thoughts.
I still don't... I think we have a problem. I don't think. We definitely have a problem. As a country, we have a lot of selfish leaders who play lip service to serving the people of this country. And so you would hear statements like this over and over again, but nobody is pushing that policy. Nobody is making the move to make the sacrifice on their path. So I see the need, we definitely need to reduce our budget that goes to the National Assembly. And when I saw Liberia do it, I was like, no, your view needs to raise this hashtag, National Assembly pay cuts, and let everybody scream about it, because we realize that social media has power to cause change, and people need to pay attention to these things. We have too much money going into our National Assembly, and what exactly is their job? The people are poor. The people are poor, Murayo. We have #2 in the world in terms of the poorest, malnourished children. And yet we're dedicating 5.5 billion naira to buy vehicles. So we have selfish leaders. And if they refuse to make the move and sacrifice, the nation, the people should hold them accountable and force them to make the move. So yes, your statement about federal character is important, but we already have the House of Representatives showing federal character, so we don't need the Senate also to show federal character. We need to have a National Assembly that reflects the state of our economy.
Okay, so I would agree with Tope on that. I like the fact that people are we're having talks on this pay cuts from different countries. I'm happy with what Italy is doing. I'm happy with what Liberia is doing. I'm happy with what the president did. That was about last week when he did the Ester codes here, the cut down of the Ester codes. I'm very happy, but that is not our problem. Our problem is the cost of governance. Let's not make the legislatures our scapegoats. They are not the scapegoat. They are not the problem. If we cut down their pay and we still run our government the way it is being run today, we will still get into trouble. Because how much are we really going to save from cutting from the legislatures? They are not the problem. So we need to look at it holistically. We have three arms of government. We have the executive, we have the judiciary. We are all saying that the cost of governance in Nigeria is too expensive. We are looking at the presidential system of government. Has it worked for us? Should we go back to the parliamentary?
Wait, I'll come to that, because when you talked about cost of governance, I mean, I have been privileged to work closely with a few people, government officials, and I see the kind of work they do. And I've seen one person using his own private car to go and do inspections, go around schools, going, and I'm thinking to myself, why are you using your private car? Even I had to do a few of those with my own car, and I hit my car. My car is in the house now. Now, in that kind of situation, you say cost of governance. But the truth is that some of these lawmakers need those vehicles.
They don't need it. They don't need it.
Calm down. Remember, we all raised alarm when they wanted to purchase vehicles for lawmakers, saying we don't need that. So should they be using their private vehicles to go and do inspections across the country?
Of course. Exactly.
So my car that was bashed because I was going to go and help somebody.
Yes.
My car is there. I've not fixed it.
You are saving your nation.
Okay, so this is
Okay,
so this is what I think in answer to that question is that we're not saying that the government should not provide the tools that it needs to carry out a job. It should, but also you need to do it. It should be commensurate with what is happening on ground. So instead of buying SUVs, things like that, that cost millions of naira, which makes no sense. Let's look for proper utility vehicles that can do this work. And they do not cost as much. And I'm seeing we're trying to also market a particular Nigerian brand. Let's look into that and see what we can do for that industry and government at the same time. Also, going back to the initial question, I really commend the Liberian government for doing this. And I agree with Obiajulu, which is we're sort of making the legislature like the scapegoat, because really, you know, the 2020 budget, it's what goes to our National Assembly is 1.25 billion, right? And that is just a little about 1% of our budget. So even if they were to cut their salaries by 50, it wouldn't make much of a dent, you know, in the expenditure. So what we should do is the cost of governance. And it's not in people like that use their private cars to do work. We're talking of governor. He's traveling from one state to the other. He carries a retinue of people. He's traveling to a country. He carries like 40, 50 people alongside him. Do you understand? Those are the things that are
used by the executive. We must acknowledge that the executive...
That is where... that is where I am even going. It seems that the executive has that mindset that, okay, we understand where these costs are and we're tackling it. So it gives me hope that this government actually is probably sitting down with a team and they're looking for best ways to address our issues.
Can we bring it to states? Because after we deal with the federal government, let's bring it to states. So when the federal government has a large chunk of the money, the next person that gets majority of the money, actually the states get majority of the money more than the federal government, because they get the fund for both the local government and the states. So we focus our eyes and our attention on the federal government when the closest government to us is the state government. So we must also hold the state's House of Assembly accountable on what their budget is and what they are funding. And I think every Nigerian should understand that we are a poor country. We're thinking based on Giant of Africa back in the days. We're no longer that financially strong. We are borrowing for everything, internally and externally. So when you have a poor country, you must cut your coat according to the material available. You can't be borrowing money to buy yourself cars and be specifying imported vehicle. Why?
Ernest, are you there? Thanks for calling. Hello? Oh, I'm so sorry for keeping you that long.
Budgets. The budget we have right now, we got the estimation from the assumption that the oil benchmark will get to $60 per barrel. Assumption. nobody plans your life with what you hope you are going to get. You plan with what you have on ground. Yes. So what for me, what I will even call for is a review of our constitution. That constitution is not serving us anymore. We have to look into it. We have to find out solutions that work for us. We don't necessarily have to copy the presidential or parliamentary,
which the government is trying to do on all fronts with agriculture. But yes, but going back to the issue of cost of governance, I feel that Nigerians always throw this term out without really thinking critically of what it really means. Governance is expensive. We must admit and accept that.
The way we run it here. The way we run it here.
Here.
Yes. The way we run it
that's
here.
That's why it's expensive.
In Nigeria, we are copying a system, hook, line, and sinker. We need to domesticate our democracy.
We are not even copying it well.
We must domesticate our policies to the current reality of what we are now and what we have now. Last year's budget had deficit. This year's budget had deficit. Once we continue like this, we're not serious.
When the Honorable Minister of Works, I think it was Mr. Fashola at the time, said that he had traveled across the country to every single road in the 36 states. So he knew every single road and what was being done. Now, that is cost of governance. Is he going to go by himself? No. He's going to go with experts. He's going to go with people who know. Now, you expect someone like that not to have a budget to accommodate all the people across the country. So the point is that we say it without thinking about the actual process. Not traveling out. I'm talking about within Nigeria.
Whenever it travels out, you shouldn't get $900 per day as extra code.
That's the international. That's not him. That's Ramfak. That's different from him. It's not him.
It's all of them.
Let me come take this call. I'll come to you, Mariam. Thanks for calling. Are you there? Ogbonna, are you still there? Ogbonna, are you there?
Yes, I'm there.
Thanks for calling. Go ahead, please.
All right. Like I said, I'm calling from Abakaliki.
Okay.
Ladies in the building, you guys are discussing what is on point. And what I mean by that is this. In this country, we don't need bicameral legislature.
Thank you, sir.
House of Reps is enough.
Yeah.
We don't need the Senate at all. Apart from that, what do we need the Minister of State for? What's their function? What are they doing?
Minister of State.
We have ministers. In some ministries, we have two ministers. What are they doing?
Federal character.
People don't care about the people they lead. They are so selfish. They don't think about us. For instance, I'm from the southeast. Just over a month ago, Enugu International Airport was closed. These people ran to the president to go and get him to give money to start the repair work there. But anyone in the expressway has been so dilapidated for more than 10 years that nobody's talking about that. They are not interested because they are not using that one. They are flying on the air. And this one that affects them directly, they run to the president to see.
Thank you very much, Ogbonna.
To see the way they think.
Thank you very much for your views.
Yeah, so, he makes a good point, which is you need to be in touch with the people. And so whatever it is you do, however it is done anywhere else, what do you have to do so that it shows that you understand what is going on? So for what I see Liberia has done, definitely that's a government very in touch with the people. Do you realize that in this, it was not just the lawmakers that made this cut. The president made a 25% cut. Then the executive did a 6% cut. But do you know also what they did? Teachers, medical personnel, security personnel are not part of this cut. And anyone that earns $500 and below are not part of this cut. So these are people sitting down and domesticating their policies. There's nothing wrong with coming up with something that works very well for your own community. And that's all we're asking.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. We have to go on a break. When we come back, we'll continue this conversation. But we're going to bring in a guest later on to help us understand, especially because our president plans to, I think it's 100 million Nigerians out of poverty. Take 100 million Nigerians out of poverty. We want to find out how that's going to work. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Stay tuned. Your View will be right back. Welcome back to Your View.
Thanks for staying with us. So President Muhammad Buhari recently announced that his administration planned to lift 100 million Nigerians out of poverty within 10 years. Just like last Thursday, also Minister of Information and Culture, Alhaji Lai Mohammed, also reiterated government's commitment at the media briefing to mark the 2019 World Poverty Eradication Day. How realistic are their plans? We have with us again the economy survey analyst, Mr. Roman Oseghale. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you.
You can call us on 07080668014. You can also tweet to us at TVC Connect. Please hashtag YourViewTVC so we can read your tweet. Before we talk about lifting 100 million people out of poverty, I want us to go back to the issue of cuts in cost of governance. We talked about it earlier, and the president actually tried to present a case for reducing cost of governance by reducing the ESTA codes, ensuring that they reduce traveling, the number of people entourage that follow you when you travel. Now, these were nice. Everybody was happy about that. But my question to you, sir, is this enough? Which is what I think Obiajulu said earlier. Reducing the cost of travel, reducing even salaries of our lawmakers, is that enough to lift us out of poverty, number one, and to also get Nigeria on the positive from the deficit we currently have in our budget?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. I think I said this last year on one of the interviews I had. We run an expense budget, not an investment budget, right? And that's when your expense supersedes your investments. That's the kind of economy we run. And once your expense supersedes your investments, you're getting poorer. And once your expense supersedes your investments and population increases, you're getting super poor. Now, what the government has done is a step in the right direction, because obviously that will help us reduce our budget deficits.
Right.
Now, our surplus of trade surplus rather, only comes from oil revenue. And anytime soon, if you look at the trends of things going on in the world now, all countries are changing to electric cars, right? I believe that at some point, oil is going to become coal. The way coal came and it was the hype, and at the end of the day, it became nothing. So we are in that anticipatory stage right now, when you look at figures, you look at trends, you look at things that are happening, and you start to make projections. Very soon, we're going to get to the reactive state, because global oil demand is going to be falling, right? And as it falls, the price is going to fall, right? Because there's going to be supply will outstrip demand. And as it falls, we're going to have a wider budget deficit if we do not diversify.
But people predicted we wouldn't get to that point until about 30 years, that we still have some time. I mean, based on some...
Before crisis happens, there are 3 stages. You have the anticipatory stage, where you start to anticipate. Probably maybe there's a disruptive innovation in the market. Now, if you don't take actions, it gets into the reactive stage. Reaction starts to happen. You see that the innovation is already disrupting the market. You're not selling, just like what happened to, Kodak and Nokia, right? And then you enter the crisis situation. We are in the anticipatory state right now. The world governments are saying, look, I think we're fast. No. In our monolithic economy, right? We're in the anticipatory state right now, because Europe is saying maybe by 2030 or 2040, they want to phase out. For the first time, in Canada, when I drive 3-4 hours in the past, I would see Tesla maybe 3-4 on the road. Now, I do the same 4 hours drive, and I can count as much as maybe 25, 30. You go to the massive malls now, all you see are charging points. Oil is going to fall, and as it falls, if we are not prepared for it, it's going to be a crisis for us.
Should we still stay on the pay cuts? I just wanted to chip in, if you just a question. So I believe that we are treating the symptoms and not the root cause of the issue.
Yes.
Because for me, the cost of getting into power is something we cannot overlook.
for someone who invests billions in campaigns and gets into power, we want to recoup that money back. It's investment. He has to put his interests first to settle the godfathers who have supported him. So if we don't look at it from that angle of getting into power, we can't get anywhere, because if I get there with so much money being spent, I have to recoup my money back. So what do you think that we can do aside from this pay cut? Because for me, it's just more like treating the symptoms. We're not looking at the originality of this problem.
I think government needs to do the same thing the US is doing. They look at your campaign funds, right? There's got to be policies that monitor campaign funds, right? Yeah. Now, when you look at those monies, those funds, where it's coming from, and you see that there are illicit funds or maybe it exceeds what is expected, right? Investigation needs to go in there. And second, I think the bane of this whole thing is that public service is too attractive. We need to make public service unattractive. There are people who want to serve, who really want to give to the country, are the people that will step forward and go into such places.
That's the real issue. Let me go there. I want to say something, but let me just take that back. Now, 100 million people out of poverty. That's about 1 million people per year, if we're going to go by the 10 years that our president has projected.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, they've talked about diversification. They are going to agriculture. Now they've restricted 43 items from coming into the country, trying to force internal production, getting manufacturers to begin. It hasn't started, but these are all projections. In your view, as much as we agree that these are steps in the right direction, are there any drastic changes we must make to at least to begin to see the quick wins? Because we are thinking of 1 million people per year for the next 10 years. How realistic is this?
Look, I tell people, see, we make comparison with China. We make comparison with Singapore. I'll tell you a story. See, China did not open their markets, right? They didn't join the World Trade Organization, I think, until the 90s. They did not open their economy into a free market economy, I think, until 1978. They had to get it right before they did all those things, right? The border closure, you can, if you listen to what Colonel Ahmed Ali said, right, when he was briefing the lawmakers and how well they have been able to make progress. I am in full support of it, 150%, because it is yielding fruits. Now, on the aspect of manufacturing and producing things in-house, it's also a step in the right direction, because if you look at the 4 factors that constitute the assets of a country, which the World Bank had defined, which we discussed last week, produce goods. It's all about your infrastructure, your manufacturing, right? Now, that manufacturing part is what we need to get right. The same necessity is the mother of what? All invention. If we decide to close our borders, it will force us to think, it will force us to go back to the drawing table and do the right thing. Second, we compare Nigeria to Singapore. Did you know that in the time of Lee Kuan Yew, right, Forex, in fact, Forex was so restricted that it was only given to people who wanted, people and companies who wanted to bring in machineries for manufacturing, to the point that people, the society, the citizens of the country, right, they came together in union. They were so in agreement that when you see your neighbor smoking a foreign-made cigarette, you branded that neighbor like a traitor, somebody who was sabotaging the economy. Do you understand? Now, until we all, and why am I saying this? Until the North, East, West, South, we all come together and say, look, we need to make this thing work. Yeah. It will not work.
Okay, so, and I agree with you that everything should trickle down, in that we should all take this journey together. Everybody must take ownership. We've said over and over again, smuggling is not a career. Don't make smuggling your job. Don't do it. It's spoiling our economy. However, when my National Assembly representative, the person representing me, is saying that he wants a particular imported brand and not a Nigerian brand, and the money is approved, and other than buying a local manufacturing, we have just one big company in Nigeria manufacturing cars locally, owned by Nigeria, and we now take our funds that we don't have enough of to pump into another country. Okay. It has, charity has to begin from home.
Let me address that. our consumer behavior, and I'll say this again, our consumer behavior is skewed towards foreignness. And that is one of the aspects we need to first of all address. We need to start appreciating our locally made things, because if we do not buy them, 200 million population is a huge market, right? And that huge market will only strive if we decide to patronize the locally made goods. It is not wrong to say, okay, well, we need to look outward sometimes to say, buy foreign-made goods. But those foreign-made goods should be termed under necessity, not wants. And until we do that, we might not be heading anywhere, because you look at the landscape, the manufacturing, we need to get competitive, right, to be able to break the market. And being competitive is patronizing the locally made goods.
Yes.
So let's just go back to the numbers again.
Yes.
10 million.
100 million.
I mean, 10 million a year.
Yes.
So we're looking at. And our president has also said, I mean, when he met with his newly formed economic team, talking about generating data locally, because he sort of does not, you know, the data we get from outside our country does not truly reflect what it is that we're going through.
According to him.
You know, so how do these foreign people get information, get this data that we seem unable to get? And how much should we trust that they have truly captured exactly what is happening in Nigeria? Do we truly have 100 billion? Or is it that when we now locally do this, we find that it's much less or even way more than what they're giving us?
Well, first of all, the foreign-made data, right, generated data, there are metrics that they use worldwide, and it's not just for Nigeria alone. And it is not 100% correct, but I'll tell you it's 99.9% correct, right? Now, looking at the data, when you look at your budget, for instance, I said this last week, that Nigeria's problem is a systematic problem. It's not an individual thing. Bill Gates said by 2040, Nigerian DRC is going to account for 40% of people living in extreme poverty, right? Now, between now and 2040, we're going to have 4 presidents. President Buhari is going to finish 2023. We're going to have other 2 presidents that are going to do 8 years each. Then we have the last president doing 1 year in office. So what is told you is that irrespective of who sits in Aso Rock, right, that this is what is going to happen. So it's a systematic thing. The system creates extreme poverty. And then when you look at it, if you go to let's look at slide 3, for instance, things that move people out of poverty. You find out that your education expenditure, for instance, right, is so abysmally low that these are the investments you actually need, right, to create wealth. In 1980, education expenditure was 3.16% of our total GDP. In 1981, it was 4.97%. By 1982, 4.89%.
I know we have the visuals as you're speaking. Hopefully we can get our viewers
Slide 3. Now, but when you look at it, from 1986, we started reducing it, right? And by 1992, it had come to 0.78% of our GDP.
We're complaining about the results.
Hold on. You're complaining now. You're looking at the effects of what happened 38 years ago. Slide 3, please. Now, we are now investing just 0.78%. Now, when I now compared Nigeria across the whole of Africa, I did North Africa, West Africa, East Africa, Central Africa, and then the southern part of Africa. You will now find out that Nigeria invests the least in education, 0.78% as a percentage of budget. You look at countries like Cote d'Ivoire their average investment over 25 years was 4.23%. You look at countries like Ghana, 4.69%. Countries like Togo, 4.09%. Sierra Leone, 2.65%.
Can I pause you for a quick second? So let me, because this issue of education you mentioned, we understand what you said, that education obviously is important.
Yes.
But I was talking about quick wins. Education is a long-term investment where
Yes.
somebody goes to school for 4 years, 8 years, and you then begin to reap the benefits in future.
Yes.
But what Nigerians want to see
6, 3,
is
3,
what can happen now. What are those quick wins that the government can do that we can begin to see? Because we thought it was agriculture, but for whatever reason, it's not coming as fast. Because IMF recently, it was the IMF or World Bank was saying the GDP hasn't increased that much with agriculture. So the question is, sir, what can we do drastically where Nigerians can begin to see changes?
Okay. You have a 10-story building.
Yeah.
Right? You can bring it down in 1 hour. But you want to build that 10-story building?
Build it in 1 hour.
One block at a time.
Maybe 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years,
One
right?
block at a time.
Now, this is the way it works in economics, right? Whatever you're seeing now, right, did not start today. It did not start yesterday. Now, I just said something to you. The education expenditure started going down from 1986, and it reached 0.78% in 1992. And for some curiosity, it has stayed at 0.78%. It doesn't exceed 1% of our total. So that, for me, it's a question mark, right? Now, what you're seeing today is the destruction that happened, that started from 1986. What Nigeria needs to do is this. We know that we have this infrastructure and investment in human capital deficit. We need to increase it, maybe 5-10 folds, right? Now, let me finish this, right? You look at, I think in 2018 or 2018, our education expenditure was 2.1 billion. Population was 198 million people. Yet in 1980, our education expenditure was 2.086 billion, population 73 million. Now, in the adjusted net savings on how to create wealth for a country, the formula, as I said last week, was adjusted net savings equals adjusted net savings equals net savings. That's what you already have, plus education expenditure, minus energy depletion, minus mineral resource depletion, minus net forest depletion, minus damages from carbon dioxide emission, and then minus damages from particulate emissions. If your ANS, that's adjusted net savings for short, if your ANS is in the positive, that means you're creating wealth. But if it's in the negative, that means you're losing wealth and you're getting poorer. So that education investment is very, very critical for national and economic growth. And it also has a social benefit that we are not even looking at all.
There's no quick fix.
There's no quick, the truth is this, there is no quick fix.
Okay, fantastic. Let me go on a break. When we come back, we'll continue this conversation with our guests. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Stay tuned. Your View will be right back. Welcome back to Your View.
Thanks for staying with us. So going back to this issue of lifting 10 million people out of poverty for the next 10 years, the government have tried to initiate various initiatives, like they'll say schools acquisition, bead making, baking. What's that one they do? Kakena pep. The other one, soap making. These are initiatives. Yeah. Now, how sustainable are these? Or are these the kind of the skills acquisition we really need to move this economy forward?
Well, first of all, a lot of people have lost school years that were not even at school, right? Now, if you go to the Western world, yeah, if your child is not in school and the social services finds out, your neighbor could even report you, they come and take that child away from you. Do you know why? And they take that child and put that child in a foster home. Do you know why? See, there's a template, right, which the Western world has, and it calculates if you do not go to school, the problem you bring to your society, the economic loss. So there's an economic loss for every child not being in school. For instance, when you look at the benefits alone, if a person goes to school, if you have if you are as a graduate, there's every tendency that your children are going to be graduates, right? Good. If you go to school, there's every tendency that you have a stable home. If you go to school, there's every tendency that you pay tax. But if you do not, all those things are reversed, right? There's an economic loss from taxation. That means that that person may not be able to pay the normal tax that they're supposed to pay in their lifetime, which is an
calculated.
Yeah, it's calculated. Let me finish. Then the second thing is this: that person, maybe a man or a woman, could be in and out of jail, right? It could become some nuisance to the society. So they know that, look, if we put this child in school and we decide to invest maybe $200,000 until that child leaves secondary school, that is the universal basic education, which every government owes everyone, right? Now, this child, for the next 45 years, before they retire at 65, may be able to earn $40,000 a year. By the time they calculate that tax, which they will take back, they will have been maybe in that 45 years been able to make maybe 500 to 750,000 from that child. So that's why they say education is an investment. It's not an expense.
Let me take this call. Thanks for calling. Are you there?
Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
Well done to everything you guys are doing. I have a contribution.
Yes, go ahead, please, Vivian.
My contribution is, yes, education is an investment. So for us to invest in Nigeria, we have to invest in year 2023 for the next election. Whomever we are picking has to be someone from within us, not people that have to go to abroad everything, be it education, and the children are in abroad, and you're going there as a public servant.
Hello, Vivian. Oh, I'm so sorry.
Very valid points.
Yeah, so we've said over time that the problem of Nigeria is our systems that are really not working.
Yes.
And I'm glad that the president has a dream of lifting 100 million Nigerians out of poverty. But I would like to know the model, the economic model he wants to use to achieve this, knowing that when they started giving this trader money to market women, you give them 10,000 naira to do business, and then they come back. When they get home, there's no good road to convey their business. There is no power to sustain themselves. The basic amenities are not there, and so they would, at the end of the day, not spend that money to run that business because they need to feed. So how do we position our system in such a way that, as we are working towards the goal of lifting Nigerians out of poverty, everything will be balanced?
To solve a problem, first of all, you need to understand how things work. If you don't understand how things work, you only be, you go around in circles, right? Now, the World Bank put forward a template on how to reduce extreme poverty. And if we seem to be going ahead of that template, right? It's just like bringing a maths formula now. You bring two maths equations, and one has to be solved with BODMAS. If you decide to not use that BODMAS, you will get it wrong. But it's not that you did not add addition, subtraction, division, right? But you need to use BODMAS to solve it. And that's what the World Bank did. They brought out the ANS, and they said, look, the wealth of countries, assets of countries are divided into 4 broad categories: produced assets, natural assets, the human capital assets, and then your net foreign assets. You need to sit down, have think tanks on how to manage that, those portfolio investment. I'll give you some figures. In 2016, right, our population growth was at 2.7%. We added 4.892 million to population, right? Now, but escape rate for extreme poverty was 12.7 people per minute. That means that we added 6.675 million people to extreme poverty, right? Now, for us not to add those people to extreme poverty, we needed to generate $4.872 billion in return from those assets management, right? Now, but for those people that went into extreme poverty, we had 4.629 billion in deficit. So you need to understand the dynamics of how it works, right? If you want to lift, for instance, the 100 million we want to lift out, if we say, okay, we want to do 10 million every year, is it the existing or the existing plus the population growth? So, do you understand? Now, that is what I have done for the next 10 years is to calculate how much we need per year for both the population growth, not to go into extreme poverty.
I'd like to get to that figures in a minute. Let me take this call from Adamu. Adamu, are you there? Hello, Adamu. Hope I've not lost that call. Adamu, are you there? From Yobe.
Yes, I'm there.
Thanks for calling. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, good morning. I'm a first-time caller.
Welcome to the show.
Yeah, hello?
We are sugar. I'd like you to get to those figures because what you projected, 10 million. Let me hear those figures, please.
See, you can lift 10 million people out of poverty every year. You look at countries like Afghanistan. You look at countries like Pakistan, right? What they did was to sit down and manage their broad portfolio investments. Now, as we demonstrated last week, right, as you decrease your natural assets, right? Now, our crude oil, we deplete it to the tune of 2.2 million barrels every day, right? We're only converting it to current assets. We're not creating wealth.
Yeah.
So we're basically getting poorer as we deplete the mineral resource asset. Now, but what do you do? What do you do with that money determines whether you get richer or you get poorer. And what the World Bank has said is invest 26% in education. But if you look at our investment over the years, we've only averaged 7%, 7 to 8% investment in education. So you don't expect when the think tanks, when the experts tell you put 26% and you're putting 7% and you expect a miracle to happen, right? It's not going to happen. Then to now do that 10 million every year, we need to attack it from the grassroots, from local government to state and then the federal. The government needs to sit down and say, look, local government, this is your responsibility. State government, this is your responsibility. And then the federal will also do this. Now, for instance, trees. Pakistan, as I said last week, planted 1 billion trees. They planted 1 billion trees, costing them $160 million. Now, by the time those trees grow up in 5 years and you reevaluate that asset, it will give you as much as 250 to 300 billion in return in assets. Your assets have been shored up, right? Yeah. As I said last week, you need to understand the concept of the balance sheet to understand what I was saying. Those 4 factors, those 4 broad portfolio investments are what makes up your asset base for the country. And it is your assets that basically determines your net worth. You understand? Your balance sheet, that determines your net worth, right? So if we are able to shore up other aspects of our assets as we deplete our oil, right? We will be using those other ones to cover the depletion, which at the end of the day gives us a better return.
So let's bring this. I want to simplify this.
Because in simplifying what you just said was, we are depleting, our oil is not renewable.
Good.
The trees are renewable.
Good.
So when we deplete oil that is not renewable, let's invest some of it into building, planting trees, which is renewable. Good. So we still find a way to balance our natural assets long term. Let's go to education, sir. Because when you say education, it's a bit broad. We've lost a generation already. Definitely. A lot of people that couldn't afford private education when we had the privilege of having parents that could take us into private primary schools and secondary schools. Yes. And they are now constituting a bit of, the crisis we have in the society. How do we educate them? Because we can't leave them behind. They will still become a problem for us while we are also investing into the grassroots secondary school, primary school education system. How do we capture the 16 to 25-year-olds that are uneducated or they've gone through secondary school but don't have the skills to make them add value to our society?
Good question. Now, I think what the government needs to do is this. That generation has lost out when it comes to the knowledge economy, right? What we need to do is get them back in a way that we can offer them skill acquisitions for free. And we also can set up evening schools. Now, my proposal is this. the schools, the public schools run from 8 to 2 p.m. every day, right? The government can offer these kids evening classes. Maybe two hours of evening classes every day, right? Free. And yeah, everything has to be free, because if you tell them to come and pay, they're not going to come, right?
I want to pause you for a question, because that was what I was trying to ask earlier. Yeah. When government try to do this, they'll say, come and learn baking, come and learn soap making, come and learn how to drive Okada. Is that what we need?
Well, can you permit me to answer this question? Because I'm a business person and I understand the problem in that. So you can empower people with skills, but if they don't have an industry to feed into, we are doing micro-entrepreneurs. We have so many micro-entrepreneurs where if the government provides an incubation system where you train the bakers and you put them right into a massive bakery and they are earning money immediately with that skill, what you have done is turn them from no skill into bakers, into earning money with the skill, and then you are benefiting the country at large. But we have micro bakers, micro tailors, micro everything that they don't have enough money to even feed themselves or pay taxes. So it's not a quick fix problem. We need to be more holistic in how we're doing the skill empowerment we're doing currently right now. That's what I foresee based on what I've experienced.
Your view is very good, right? Now, you see, when you teach people, one of the things that was also missing from our educational system is that we were not teaching people on how to become entrepreneurs.
At all.
Right? Now, if you're teaching these kids to come learn some handwork skills and stuff, if we go back and say, look, we offer them 2-3 hours every day in the evening to come do some book work, right? At least let them learn how to read and write. Let them learn how to balance their books. Let them learn how to save, right? Yes. We teach them the basics on how to manage their businesses. Yeah, that will go a long way. Those evening classes, I think, is a compulsory for that generation that has been left out of school.
There's also the other side where a lot of people are saying people are going through schools, going to schools, and do not even have the skills to help them get jobs or do proper work at the curriculum work. So even going to school is not enough. Yeah, school does not seem to be equipping them for real life.
Well, our curriculum, there was a time I also talked about the curriculum of the country, right? See, curriculums are tailored to suit whatever time you're in history.
Yes.
The curriculum we were running in the 60s, 70s, they still brought it to the 80s, they brought it to the 90s, right? For instance, now, you're looking at AI. AI is something that's going to come disrupt the market. Now, when you go to places like Rwanda, you go to places like Kenya, right? They've already started planning ahead in their curriculums for those disruption. Now, and we're still running the same old curriculums of the 80s. I teach you English, I teach you math, you know. And then, second, our educational system does not teach people how to think.
Critically, thank you, sir.
There's no critical thinking in the system, right? There's no critical thinking in the system. Now, I went to school, I did an executive MBA, and in 2 years, we handled real life cases, about 600. 600, almost 600 cases, right, that we handled in those 2 years. And it would teach you. I remember I sat down in class. There was a day I sat down in class, you know, on the lighthouse side. And I was so confused. And I asked myself, I said, Roman, who sent you message? You understand? You know, it was so intense, right? But you see, at some point, my brain opened up. Do you understand? And when it opened up, I could see things from broader perspectives.
We have to run up very soon. I wanted to talk about the issue of the emissions.
Yes.
The fact that those factors that cause poverty. Could you share a few?
Part of, when you look at the formula, right, it says your net savings plus education expenditure minus energy depletion minus net forest depletion minus carbon dioxide emissions and then minus particulate emissions. Now, the carbon dioxide we do not look at. Now, if you look at one of the slides I put up there that says the cost of CO2 damages, right? They deduct all these things from your balance sheet every year to calculate the net worth of the country. In 2014, we lost 2.8 billion to carbon dioxide emission. 2015, 2.79 billion, 2016, 2.6 billion, 2017, 2.66 billion. Now, by the time you add that to also particulate emissions, right? Now, you now find out that the particulate emissions is even higher. In 2014, particulate emissions was 9 billion. 2015, 8.1 billion. 2016, 6.9 billion. 2017, 6.2 billion. Now, what people don't understand is this. You see the dust you see, right? It's causing you to get poor.
Because you get sick.
Yeah, you get sick. It's not just that. Now, when you go abroad, try this. Take your phone. Take a picture.
It's different.
It's clearer, right? By the time you come back here, you use the same camera or phone, it looks hazy.
Yes.
Now, what your eyes can't catch, your phone catches them. You understand? Those micro particles, they cause you to become sick. Now, if you look at the CO2 emissions, it causes acid rain, right? Acid rain has its effect. CO2 makes you sick. Then you are now cutting down trees that is supposed to lower these things. Our forest has been depleted to over 100.
So killing ourselves.
Good. So you see, these things have ripple and multiplier effect. As you're cutting down your forest, Nigeria's forest reserve, right? As we will see. Just hold on, please. Let me address that part.
Nigeria is a bad business.
So that, no, we're not a bad business. We just need to understand the dynamics of how things work.
Knowledge.
Now, what I am proposing to the government is, when you look at these factors, the factors, obviously, they have sub-factors, the KPIs. We've developed key performance indexes, right, which we will measure. If your net forest is increasing, you know that your carbon dioxide emission is going to reduce. The country is going to save money from that. You know that your particulate emission is going to reduce. You're going to save money from that, right? So if you look at our net forest, I think in 1990, we had a net forest that was 18.9%, the total area of Nigeria. Today, it is just 7.2%. And the UN regulation says minimum of 12%. This is what Pakistan has done. War-torn Afghanistan that is wiping out extreme poverty. So you look at those countries, they're not richer than Nigeria. They don't have the mineral resources. So when I started doing the research, it got me concerned that what were they doing? Pakistan planted 1 billion trees. Afghanistan planted trees. The other day, Kenya planted 350 million trees.
We planted some trees too.
You would think they are easy. They are not easy, right? These are not easiest things. But they know, they've been able to study the multiplier effect. Philippines has even passed a policy.
We have to round up. So in summary, what we need, obviously, investment in education.
We need massive investment in
education and also massive tree planting.
We need to plant, we need the renewable assets. As we deplete these assets, we need to start shoring up other assets.
Other assets we can show up, aside from trees?
Our net foreign assets. The president is already doing that. He met it at 30, is now 45, right? Okay. Our produced assets, which are infrastructure, manufacturing, and then the pastoral land, your farmland also comes under natural assets. So all those are also being calculated. You know, there's rice planting and all that stuff right now.
So we're building foreign exchange, but we're depleting by borrowing money. I don't understand.
What do you mean?
We are building our foreign assets.
Yes.
We're borrowing money to fund the economy.
See, as I said last week, borrowing debt is not bad. It is what you do with the debt that determines whether it's good or bad.
I have to run up. I don't want to wait for this question.
I just wanted to ask one very short question.
Yes,
now, we know our government does not work in continuum.
Yes.
So after this plan of lifting 100 million people out of poverty, the next government comes up and throws it out.
To lift the 100 million people out of poverty, it's only possible if you understand the dynamics of how things work. And that dynamics, you need to sit down, understand these assets, which the World Bank has put out, the key performance index, and then know what your population growth is, because they use all those things to calculate them.
So every government coming in has to tap into it.
Good. That is what we have developed.
Unfortunately, we have to round up. Again, thank you so much, Mr. Oseghale, for sharing your knowledge with us. We just hope that government is listening And they can hopefully invite you to have a proper conversation
Honestly.
with the economic team, because they just reconstituted a new economic team. So we obviously need a lot of work. Now that we have an opportunity to change things.
Before we become reactive.
Yes. That's all we can take on today's show. I hope you've learned a few things. Tomorrow is another day. Have a fabulous day. See you then. Bye-bye.
Bye.